Good morning, Southwest kids. It's so great to be together again this morning. We are going to talk a little bit about the culture, about the families between Abraham and Sarah and Rebecca and Isaac, and maybe how they lived back in that time. Maybe some things about how they dressed and what their culture was like. So it's hard to imagine people wearing different things than us or living in different houses than we live in today, but it's good to know how they did live, and it helps us to understand people better. It's just like us today. I may live in a different place than you live, or your grandparents may lived in a different place than you lived, and it just, everything that is different about us can be used to bring us together, and it helps us to learn about them, and it helps us to understand maybe where they're coming from or why they act the way they do or say things the way they do, because that's where they're from and that's how they grew up. And so it's great to learn about people and about different ways that people live, and it just makes us appreciate God's design of this whole earth. If we were all exactly the same and lived exactly the same way, talked exactly the same way, how boring would that be? That would be so boring, wouldn't it? So it is so great that God gave us such a diversified world to live in, and I'm just so thankful for that. And so today, we're going to talk about Abraham's birth was about 2166 BC, okay? And Isaac's birth was 2066 BC. And I'm going to show you a timeline. Shows you where Abraham was, Isaac was, where Jesus was born. And because of the artifacts that people have found, they're able to estimate the approximate dates of their births, okay? And it just reinforces and helps to prove about Jesus's birth was the starting point of all dates. Any date before Jesus's birth is listed as BC, before Christ, and any date after Christ's birth is listed as AD, which is Anno Domini, which means the year of the Lord in Latin, okay? And that's where all of our dates come from still today. All right, so our story that we're going to talk about is taking place in Canaan, near the ancient city of Beersheba and in Mesopotamia. All right, I'm going to show you a picture of a map where Beersheba is. So Beersheba was located on the edge of a vast desert that stretched from the land of Canaan as far as Egypt. There were several wells near Beersheba, which may be why God loved Abraham there, a shepherd who needed to water his huge herds of cattle and flocks and sheep to settle here. Has anybody seen a well? There used to be in the ground, and they would have usually like a pulley at the top, and a bucket would go down to the bottom, and the bucket would fill up with water, and then you would pulley it back up, and then that's how you would get your water. That's how people drank their water. That's how they washed their clothes. That's how they fed or watered their animals. Would you like to do that nowadays? I think it's hard sometimes to have to go out and turn on the water hose and have to walk outside the house. So we don't have it very bad, do we? No, we don't. All right, now we're going to talk about Moriah, Mount Moriah. Let me show you a picture of where that's at. Okay, now Mount Moriah was the site where Abraham took Isaac, his son, to be sacrificed, and it's near the city of Salem, later known as Jerusalem, okay? And then I know in one of the lessons we did Google Earth to find All right, but I'm going to show you where that is on this map. Okay, so Abraham had sent his servant all the way back to the city of Nahor, also known as Haran, close to his hometown of Ur, and that was to find a bride for Isaac. Okay, so we are going to talk about families again, okay? All right, here's our word, family. All right, who lives with you in your family? You have maybe your mom, maybe your dad, maybe your grandmother lives with you. Well, in the in the ancient Middle East, not only did parents and their children live together, but their families also included their grandparents, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, and their servants. Loyalty and respect for one's family was all important because families were thought to be woven together by God. Families lived close together for protection and companionship and to be able to help each other with their herds, with their farming, and with the kids. Tent-dwelling families, such as Abraham and Isaac's, all camped together in a huge encampment for company and for protection. Only in very desperate circumstances, such as a drought, which is when there's no rain, would a family member move away. And it was extraordinary that Abraham had the faith to leave his family to journey to a new land that he knew nothing about. So you guys probably have all maybe been camping sometime or another where you maybe even went with some friends or with some family. And isn't that so fun? Everybody's camped near each other and the kids can play together, and it's just fun to go camping. You have great memories of going camping. Well, that's how they lived all the time. They had all their family with them all the time, and how fun would that be to have your cousins there to play with and your favorite aunts and uncles, but of course the not favorite aunts and uncles may live there too, but everybody was together and they all helped each other and they all looked out for each other and they protected each other. The father's role in ancient times was not only meant the head of each family, but was a title of respect that referred to the leader of the tribe or city. Within the family, the father ruled with authority, that making most of the decisions, protecting his family and overseeing the work of the family. In addition, he acted as a teacher, passing on the skills of his livelihood to his sons, and as well as his religious teachings. Okay, and the mother's role in most of the pagan, which is non-believing people in God, Canaanite culture, women were often treated as little more than servants. It was common in these ancient times for women to have to haul wood, to bake bread, to look after all the children, to sew, to milk the goats, while the husbands relaxed and visited with their friends. And it was customary for the women to wear veils over their faces for modesty and not to associate with any men outside of the family. And however, this is not God's plan, is it? The Bible tells us that wives and mothers and sisters of God's people were treated much more respectfully. While fathers were in charge of the family's work, mothers were in charge of the home. And women washed clothes using soap made from wood ashes. They beat the rugs with sticks. And but most importantly, God's plan for a mother and the father was to love and to respect one another. In Genesis 23, it relates to how much Abraham mourned for his wife Sarah when she died. And so he was really sad when that happened. He loved her. And then in Genesis 24:67, it tells about Isaac's grief for his mother and how much he grew to love his wife Rebekah. So the men that loved God, they loved women. And so everybody is important to God. Now, the children, guess what the children look like? They look like you. Yeah. The kids looked exactly the same, just like you looked back then. But maybe they wore a robe, or they wore, you know, something on their head all the time instead of a ball cap. They might wear a turban. But children were considered a wonderful blessing from God in ancient times, and people wanted large families. It was considered to be kind of shameful if a woman could not have children, and especially sons. The births of sons were much more celebrated, since sons carried on the family name and also stayed and helped work with the family, while daughters who married went on to live with the husband's family. A woman who was childless was often ridiculed or even barred from attending weddings or other family events. So no wonder Sarah laughed in amazement and joy when she was told she was going to have a child at her old age, because she probably was just so sad about it. But children were very respected and loved by their parents. A child might greet his parents by kissing their hands or bowing down. Children also learn to be very responsible at young ages. Boys worked alongside with their fathers, learning to be shepherds and farmers and businessmen. And girls learned domestic skills from their mothers, such as cooking, spinning, weaving, and being businesswomen, because after they spun clothes or spun rugs, then they had to sell them to pay for food. A daughter was also responsible for keeping oils in the lamps burning at home, as well as helping her brother tend the flocks of sheep and goats. Okay? And then there was grandparents. Grandparents and all the other relatives also instructed the children in daily tasks, as well as religious teachings, and children were taught to respect and honor their parents and grandparents. Isaac's parents, Abraham and Sarah, were old enough to be his grandparents. And that's what some people have said about Sadie, that her mother is old enough to be her grandma, but that's not true. I am a little bit older, but I am not old enough to be her grandmother. So, Isaac was, he was the son of Abraham and Sarah, and he was beloved, protected, and cherished. And each time his parents spoke about his name, which means he laughs, they were surely reminded of the joy and the miracle of his birth. And from his earliest childhood, Isaac knew he was going to fulfill an awesome promise that God had made to Abraham. And in Genesis, it portrays him as a young boy and a man of great patience and love and respect from for his parents. All right. And back then, the parents usually helped pick the wife who their son was going to marry. And in Genesis 24, it tells about a very interesting and unusual custom in Isaac's day. And what they did, they would place their hand underneath Abraham's leg as like a handshake or something. That's what they did to kind of seal the deal, is they would put their hand underneath his leg. So Abraham's servants demonstrated his to promise to find a wife for Isaac. Today we shake hands or we sign a document, a contract, to agree to do that kind of thing. But Abraham's servant asked God to help him find a godly wife for Isaac. So Abraham's servant knew that the travelers would also be kindly and offer him water. And he had prayed, he was like, Lord, if you will just have whoever comes to the well offer to water my camels as well, then that will be the wife that you have chosen for Isaac. And so I'm going to show you this picture here of what it may have looked like. So that was the woman that God had chosen to be Isaac's wife, was Rebekah. And Rebekah was taught to be respectful just as Isaac was. And after her long journey back to Beersheba, when she finally saw Isaac, she got off of her camel and she covered her face with a veil to show him honor. Okay? So, now, I showed you some of those pictures of what maybe Abraham, maybe Sarah, what they looked like, and then what it looked like maybe what it looked like going to the well. I'm going to show you a picture of a tent now of what it may have looked like for where they might have lived. Okay, so that was a pretty nice tent, wasn't it? Would you like to live in that your whole life? But you would get to be with your cousins and you would get to be with your grandparents. So that would be pretty fun, I think. So, but what have you noticed about all those pictures? They had on tunics, cloaks maybe. They wore sandals. Would you like to wear that all the time? Women wore veils, sometimes over their face to cover their face. And the men maybe wore the turbans where they wrapped up the material around their head. You know, you just have to trade your ball cap for a turban. That's all you'd have to do. So, but we've heard all the different roles that everyone had in the family. But in all of those roles that I mentioned, did I mention anything about anyone being more important than the other? Did I say, oh, this person's role was so important, and then here's all the other people's roles? No, I didn't say that, did I? So no matter what your role is in your family, if you're the oldest, if you're the youngest, it doesn't matter. You are very important to your family, and you're important to God, and you're also important to me. All right, so thank you for being you and for being in your family. All right, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week.